Every generation has that one machine that transcends its purpose. Something born from necessity but remembered for emotion. It starts as a simple means to move, yet ends up defining decades of design, community, and cultural memory. The shape becomes familiar before the name does. Its sound and silhouette imprint themselves across continents. People customize it, race it, paint it, and pass it down. It becomes both artifact and friend, the sort of machine that reminds us how simplicity can outlast ambition. This story traces that transformation. How a humble piece of engineering grew into an icon recognized even by those who never drove one. Because sometimes the smallest car can carry the biggest legacy. If you enjoy deep dives into automotive legends, like, subscribe, and tell us which classic deserves the next spotlight. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle marked a turning point in the evolution of a car that had already become a global fixture. By the mid-1960s, the Beetle was no longer simply a practical vehicle. It had become a social statement on wheels. The 1967 model, however, was where Volkswagen subtly recalibrated its formula, balancing the old with the new. This particular year brought updates that were both mechanical and philosophical, reflecting a company aware that its tiny creation had outgrown its original mission. The Beetle was conceived as an affordable car for the masses, yet by 1967, it was a global citizen, built in multiple countries and adored by people who could afford far more expensive options. The new 12-volt electrical system, a more powerful 1,500 cubic centimeters engine, and small exterior revisions signaled maturity without losing the charm that had defined it for decades. The car's round headlights, compact frame, and unmistakable engine tones still carried the DNA of its pre-war ancestry. But the experience behind the wheel felt more refined. Every line on the 1967 Volkswagen Beetle reflected Volkswagen's awareness that nostalgia and innovation could coexist in harmony. It was the last of the classic era before safety regulations, emission standards, and modern conveniences began reshaping what cars needed to be. In that sense, it was not just a car. It was a bridge between two worlds. Owners who drove the 1967 Beetle often recall its direct connection to the road. It lacked power steering or power brakes, yet the steering wheel communicated every contour of the pavement. It was a car that rewarded patience. Acceleration was measured, not explosive, but it moved with steady determination. The sound of its air-cooled flat-4 engine became part of the driving ritual, a steady hum rather than an aggressive roar. Simplicity became the Beetle's greatest strength. Without complex electronics or layers of insulation, every vibration and every click of the engine told the driver something about the car's state. It demanded attentiveness, not detachment. The Beetle was one of the few machines that treated its driver as part of the mechanism, not just a passenger along for the ride. In 1967, this relationship was still pure, untouched by the digital intermediaries that now fill modern dashboards. The model's engineering philosophy also reflected Volkswagen's meticulous approach to evolution. Instead of overhauling the Beetle with each generation, the company applied incremental improvements. A slightly stronger gearbox, revised bumpers, better headlights, and enhanced reliability. To the casual observer, the differences between a 1966 and a 1967 Beetle might appear trivial. To enthusiasts, those details were the difference between eras. The introduction of the 12-volt system, for instance, allowed for brighter headlights and a more reliable electrical network. Small yet meaningful changes that made daily use easier. That subtlety is what kept the Beetle relevant. It was never meant to chase trends or shock buyers with annual redesigns. It was built on the principle that good design, once found, needs only gentle refinement. The Beetle's body shape had become more than a design choice. It was an identity. By the time the 1967 version appeared, that rounded roofline and curved fenders were iconic enough to be recognized in silhouette alone. No badge was needed. That simplicity made it universal. A driver in Mexico, Germany, or Indonesia saw the same car and felt part of a shared story. It was a mechanical Esperanto, speaking across cultures without translation. For many, it symbolized freedom, mobility, and youth. The car's affordability put it within reach of students, artists, and families, giving it a democratic aura. The Beetle carried everyone equally, without pretension. The 1967 model also emerged during a time of shifting consumer expectations. In the United States, The automotive landscape was dominated by muscle cars and growing horsepower wars. Yet the Beetle thrived precisely because it refused to participate. Its 53 horsepower engine was modest, but it offered reliability that muscle cars could not match. The Beetle was not about speed. It was about constancy. It outlasted competitors by promising what they could not: simplicity, efficiency, and endurance. Volkswagen understood this and marketed the car with a sense of humor that resonated deeply. The Beetle's advertisements from this era were minimalist, witty, and self-aware. They embraced the car's small size rather than apologizing for it. By turning perceived weaknesses into virtues, Volkswagen created one of the most effective brand voices in automotive history. That philosophy found its most authentic expression in the 1967 Beetle, a model that captured both the old spirit of modest engineering and the confidence of a company at its peak. The global reach of the Beetle also expanded dramatically around this time. Production spread beyond Germany into places like Brazil and Mexico, ensuring that the car was not just an export but a locally rooted phenomenon. Each factory added its own touches, yet the essence remained intact. That uniformity of spirit made the Beetle a cultural equalizer. The 1967 model found its way into villages, suburbs, and city centers, crossing class boundaries effortlessly. In Indonesia, where it was affectionately called the Kodak, meaning frog, the Beetle became part of everyday life. In the United States, it became a countercultural symbol, embraced by those who wanted to drive something honest and unpretentious. This dual identity, functional yet emotional, made it far more than a commodity. It became a companion. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle sits at the heart of that story because it represents the last unfiltered version of an idea. Later models would adopt more safety features, padded dashboards, and thicker bumpers, moving toward modern expectations. But the 1967 car held on to its mechanical purity while quietly embracing necessary evolution. It proved that even in a changing world, simplicity could still feel fresh. In an era of industrial optimism, this little car reminded drivers that progress did not always mean complication. It meant refinement, balance, and restraint. The 1967 Beetle embodied all three. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle continued its quiet revolution as it rolled into a rapidly transforming world. By the late 1960s, the automotive industry was obsessed with performance, size, and luxury. Yet this small, air-cooled car defied every convention. Its charm was not in power, but in persistence. The Beetle refused to age the way trends did. It was the same familiar face amid a crowd of changing designs, the same hum of an engine that sounded like reliability itself. Underneath, however, subtle engineering changes made the 1967 model the most refined of the original lineage. The 1,500 cubic centimeters engine gave it more torque and better highway performance, allowing it to keep up with modern traffic. The synchronized gearbox made shifting smoother, a small but crucial detail that made the driving experience less laborious. Volkswagen engineers had spent decades fine-tuning this car, shaving imperfections, and improving quality without disturbing the original concept. It was a masterclass in iterative design, the art of knowing when enough was enough. This was the last Beetle built before regulation, and modernization began to blur the line between simplicity and compromise. That distinction gives the 1967 car its mythic status among collectors. When enthusiasts restore one today, they often talk about the precision of the details. The thin chrome bumpers, the single-year-only deck lid, the unique electrical system that marked the crossover to a new era. It is a car studied as much as it is driven. It teaches restraint in a world that often mistakes excess for progress. At a time when most cars became heavier, the Beetle remained light. When others grew faster, it stayed steady. It represented a different philosophy. The idea that a car could be honest. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle also carried an unexpected social gravity. By existing outside the status hierarchy of luxury and performance, it became a neutral ground for people from every walk of life. Its affordability meant it could belong to a student, a retiree, or a small business owner with equal ease. It democratized driving in a way few vehicles ever have. That neutrality turned into identity. Owners gave their Beetles names, painted them in bright colors, and customized them with stickers and flowers. The car's friendliness encouraged personalization. Where a sports car intimidated, The Beetle invited. It created communities long before social media existed. Volkswagen clubs, weekend drives, and roadside repairs turned into rituals of belonging. The car was a shared hobby, a conversation starter, a reason to learn about mechanics. It inspired loyalty not through horsepower but through human connection. In cities, the Beetle was a practical tool. On coastal highways, it became a companion for exploration. And in places like Indonesia, where the Beetle became affectionately known as the Kodak, it took on an almost folkloric status. The word meant frog, and it fit perfectly. Small, round, endearing, and capable of leaping across rough roads without complaint. The Kodak was not just transportation. It was a family member. Generations grew up riding in its back seat, the sound of that flat four engine marking childhood memories. That intimacy gave the Beetle a cultural resonance that extended far beyond engineering. The simplicity of its design also made it nearly indestructible in the right hands. Air cooling meant fewer parts to fail. The rear engine layout gave it remarkable traction on slippery surfaces. Its ability to keep moving, even when conditions turned poor, added to its reputation. It was the car that never gave up. In the American market, it was marketed with humor and humility, contrasting sharply with the boastful tone of domestic manufacturers. The 1967 Beetle symbolized the idea that perfection was not about extravagance but balance. Its curved lines resisted fashion. Its mechanical simplicity resisted obsolescence. It was the right car for people who valued substance over spectacle. In that sense, it also became a quiet rebellion against consumer culture. Owning one was an act of taste rather than wealth. It said that you cared more about purpose than pretense. It became a silent critique of excess, wrapped in cheerful simplicity. That cultural position helped it survive decades of change. When oil prices spiked in the 1970s, the Beetle's efficiency suddenly looked prophetic. When design became sterile in the 1980s, nostalgia brought it back to prominence. And when sustainability entered the modern conversation, the Beetle's minimalist engineering earned new appreciation. Every decade found a reason to rediscover it. That resilience comes from the way the 1967 model struck a perfect equilibrium. It was modern enough to drive comfortably, yet traditional enough to remain purely mechanical. No unnecessary gadgets, no distractions. Just a driver, an engine, and a purpose. This purity created emotional attachment. People trusted their Beetles not because they were the fastest, but because they were faithful. In an age of planned obsolescence, the Beetle was the rare car that improved with age. It was never obsolete, only familiar. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle demonstrated that a car could be both tool and companion, that dependability could be beautiful. It was the kind of engineering that asked for care, not admiration, and rewarded its owner with consistency. Long after production ended, this car continued to move, teach, and connect people across generations. Its legend was not built by marketing departments but by the lived experiences of millions who drove one. That is what makes it more than metal. It is memory in motion. The Beetle's essence was the bond it created, and the 1967 version remains the purest expression of that bond. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle entered history as both an endpoint and a beginning. It was the final version to retain the soul of the original while quietly adapting to a changing world. By the time production wound down in Germany, the Beetle's spirit had already migrated across continents, finding new homes in Mexico, Brazil, and Southeast Asia. There, its second life began. The design was so universally understood that local industries could sustain it without constant innovation. The Beetle was no longer just a German car. It was a global citizen, a machine that belonged everywhere and to everyone. That universality explains why the 1967 model has become such a sought-after collector's item. It captures the last breath of the era before modernization reshaped simplicity into complexity. Its single-year features, like the one-year-only bumpers and electrical system, turned it into a benchmark for authenticity among enthusiasts. To drive one today is to experience a direct link to the past, unfiltered by decades of technological mediation. You feel the vibration through the wheel, hear the engine behind you, and realize that the car's communication is mechanical rather than digital. The 1967 Beetle was not about isolation from the road. It was about immersion in it. That experience has become increasingly rare, which makes the car feel even more valuable in retrospect. Its story also carries lessons about sustainability long before the term became fashionable. The Beetle's longevity came from repairability and restraint. Its air-cooled engine could be rebuilt on a kitchen table with basic tools. Parts were cheap, abundant, and interchangeable. Owners became mechanics by necessity, and in doing so, they developed respect for how things worked. It was an ecosystem of durability rather than disposability. Modern cars, built for comfort and complexity, often lack that intimacy. But the 1967 Volkswagen Beetle reminded people that good engineering invites participation. It empowered owners to maintain and understand their machines, bridging the gap between technology and humanity. Even now, when enthusiasts gather at Beetle festivals or restoration meets, the 1967 model is treated as a time capsule. It represents a philosophy that valued connection over convenience. Its small engine hums at a steady rhythm, the same rhythm that powered millions of stories. For some, that sound recalls youth and freedom. For others, it represents craftsmanship and perseverance. Around the world, the Beetle found different meanings but always carried the same essence: approachability. It asked for little but gave much in return. The Kodak nickname in Indonesia, the Bug moniker in America, and countless affectionate variations elsewhere show how deeply the car embedded itself into everyday culture. It became the background of life's journeys: weddings, road trips, first jobs, and family moves. The car's emotional durability mirrored its mechanical one. That endurance created a kind of immortality. Even as production of newer Beetles evolved into different shapes and front-engine designs, the shadow of the 1967 model lingered. Every revival, from the late 1990s new Beetle to the 2010s redesign, carried visual cues from that year's silhouette. The gentle curve of the fenders, the circular headlights, the symmetry of its face, all trace back to the 1967 archetype. Designers understood that people were not buying a car. They were buying memory, sentiment, and symbolism. Few vehicles have ever maintained that level of emotional continuity. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle proved that restraint can be timeless. It did not try to dominate attention. It simply endured until the world caught up with its philosophy again. In an age obsessed with innovation, its quiet consistency feels radical. Its story also reveals how deeply a car can shape collective identity. For Germany, it became a post-war emblem of renewal. For the United States, it was the outsider that charmed the mainstream. For emerging markets, it was mobility made possible. For everyone, it was proof that engineering could have empathy. That idea, engineering with empathy, is what continues to keep the 1967 Beetle relevant. It represents a human-centered approach to design that prioritized usability, economy, and character. No unnecessary weight, no wasted gesture, no false promises. Just a machine that worked and kept working. That honesty is what modern designers often cite when studying its legacy. The 1967 Beetle stands as a reminder that progress without connection feels hollow. When you sit behind its large steering wheel, the view ahead is modest. There is no screen, no guidance, just your senses and the road. Yet that simplicity generates confidence. You trust the car not because it predicts for you, but because it responds faithfully to your actions. That feedback loop creates a bond that no algorithm can replicate. In that way, the 1967 Volkswagen Beetle is not a relic. It is a teacher. It shows us what we lost when convenience replaced understanding. It demonstrates that accessibility and charm can coexist with functionality. It proves that good design is not loud. It is lasting. The Beetle's continued presence in film, art, and popular imagination proves that it achieved something few machines ever do. It transcended its own category. It became both symbol and sentiment. And among all the years it was built, 1967 remains the year that captured its essence most completely. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle concludes its story not with an ending, but with continuity. It remains alive in driveways, museums, and roadside gatherings where its rounded silhouette still draws smiles. The car's significance lies not in horsepower or speed, but in its ability to stay relevant through honesty. In a marketplace defined by rapid change, the Beetle's endurance feels almost spiritual. It teaches that engineering at its best does not chase novelty. It refines what already works. The 1967 model represents that principle in its purest form. It marked the culmination of decades of steady evolution, a car perfected by patience rather than reinvention. Each detail, from its precise panel gaps to its simple mechanical layout, reveals the discipline of iterative design. That discipline is what allows a 1967 Beetle to start after years of rest, to cross continents without complaint, and to inspire affection in people who were not yet born when it was made. The Beetle's influence also extends into modern automotive thought. Minimalism, sustainability, and emotional connection are now core themes in design discussions. Yet this small car embodied them long before they were trends. It was built to be maintained, not discarded. To invite understanding, not dependency. That sense of responsibility between machine and owner is something modern vehicles could still learn from. Even today, a 1967 Volkswagen Beetle feels more personal than many cars built half a century later. It is not faster, safer, or smarter in a digital sense, but it offers something irreplaceable: clarity. You know exactly what it is doing, and it never pretends to be anything else. That honesty built trust, and trust built legacy. Every sound, every vibration, every quirk is part of a conversation between the driver and the car. When people restore one, they are not just fixing metal. They are preserving a dialogue between eras. They are ensuring that the values of simplicity and authenticity remain visible in a world overwhelmed by complexity. The Beetle continues to remind us that true innovation sometimes means knowing when to stop changing. The 1967 version did just that. It reached a point where nothing essential needed alteration. It was the equilibrium of form, function, and feeling. And that equilibrium has made it timeless. If there is a single takeaway from its journey, it is that greatness often hides in modest packages. A car designed for everyone became something for all time. The 1967 Volkswagen Beetle remains proof that when design serves people instead of trends, it creates more than a product. It creates a legacy that refuses to fade.